01, Chris Gary. This is the moment they realized something was in the room with them. Back in high school, my friends and I had a hangout spot that felt like it belonged only to us. It was this old baseball field behind an abandoned grade school. We always thought that one day we'd show up and see a construction crew tearing the whole place down, but that never happened. At least not when we were kids. We all assumed it was because our town was too poor to bother with it, which honestly was probably true, but it wasn't like it was a good location anyway. It was built right beside the woods, far from everything else, basically in the middle of nowhere, which was pretty much what our whole town felt like. We liked going there because no one else ever did. People sometimes broke into the school to spray graffiti, and once in a while the cops showed up. But they never came down to the baseball field. It felt like a safe place for our group, and that mattered because a lot of my friends didn't have great home lives, especially Tim. His mom would call the cops on him for anything she could think of that day, but at the field, none of that could touch him. We spent so many summer nights sitting on those rusted bleachers, smoking and talking about anything that popped into our heads. I loved that place. We all did. But even before everything happened, there was always one thing about it that unsettled me. There was this old lamp beside the bleachers that somehow still worked. The town must have forgotten it existed. It gave off this dim orange glow, and since it was the only light there, we were always sitting inside that weird, hazy circle. It barely lit anything around us. When I got too high, I'd stare into the woods, swallowed in darkness, and think about how someone or something could be watching us without us ever knowing. It always crawled under my skin until someone cracked a joke and pulled my mind away from it. Sometimes I still wonder how many times something stood out there staring. I guess I'll never know. During the start of summer one night, my friend Johnny and I planned to meet at the field. I must have left earlier because when I got there, his car wasn't anywhere. I decided to head in alone. In our group, going through the woods by yourself at night was kind of a rule you didn't break. Even though we liked pretending we were tough, none of us really wanted to walk through those trees alone. But I always liked the little rush it gave me. I walked past the school and through the woods until I reached the field. I waited maybe 10 minutes, and when Johnny still wasn't there, I lit up a smoke. Another 30 minutes passed and nothing. By then, the thrill had completely died. I started walking back to my car and ended up jogging because the dark felt too heavy. I texted him a few times, but he didn't answer. I sat in my car another 10 minutes, then finally drove home. When I woke up the next day, he still hadn't texted back. I was annoyed, but didn't think much of it until later, when my mom asked if I'd seen Johnny. I contacted all our friends, but they knew the same amount as I did. The last time anyone had seen him was at the field 2 nights before. One day passed, then another, and soon the whole town knew. Search parties went everywhere. My friends and I joined a few, but we didn't find anything. No one did. His body was never recovered. I kept trying to convince myself he had just run away. He always talked about wanting to travel the world and how trapped our town made him feel. But deep down, I knew he wouldn't leave us like that. He would have left at least a note, probably on the bleachers, where only we would have found it. About a month later, I went back to the field by myself. I was so frustrated with life that I didn't care if something in the woods attacked me. But as soon as I reached the end of the path, I froze. There were people sitting on the bleachers. For a moment, I thought it was my friends, since we'd never seen anyone else there before, but they weren't. I had never seen these people in my life. 3 of them sat perfectly still, like they were carved out of stone, but they weren't the ones that bothered me. There was another one. He was dancing and skipping around the bleachers, moving like he was overly happy for no reason. It wasn't normal happiness. It was the kind that made your stomach twist. At first, I thought he was probably on something. Now I'm convinced he was just disturbed. The worst part was that he looked familiar. I couldn't place him, like when you see a blurry face in a dream. You know you've seen it before, but you can't remember where. The whole scene was too strange. I quietly turned and tried to leave without drawing attention. They didn't follow. At least, I don't think they did. I got to my car and wanted to speed away immediately, but something made me circle around the school parking lot instead. In the back corner, I saw a car. I recognized the model. It was the same one Johnny drove, but right as I spotted it, its headlights turned on. I panicked, reversed fast, and drove off. As summer went on, those people stayed stuck in my mind. I told my friends, and they agreed it was weird, but didn't think too hard about it. I stopped going to the field completely. One late July afternoon, I was missing Johnny a lot, so I grabbed the school yearbook to feel close to him again. That's when I saw him. One of the janitors was standing in the background of a sports photo. The moment I turned the page, I knew it was the dancing man. Same face, same hair. It was him. I couldn't believe it. I told my friends, but no one knew what to do. Eventually, I went to the police. They probably thought I was crazy, but they still checked him out. Or at least they said they did. They found nothing. Even his social security info didn't exist. I'd tried looking him up myself, but there was nothing. It was like he didn't exist at all, like he was a ghost walking around in our world. Near the end of summer, I went back to the field with a few friends. The whole time, I felt eyes on me. Every time I stared into the dark woods, fear crawled up my spine. I missed the comfort that place used to hold, but I knew that feeling was gone forever. That field wasn't a home anymore. When I left that night, I never went back. A bit later, early one morning at Dunkin' Donuts, I was barely awake when I saw him. The dancing man, the janitor. He looked exactly the same. At first, I thought my tired brain was messing with me, but the longer I stared, the more certain I became. Then he noticed me and smiled. He rushed out of the shop and I followed, but one of his friends was waiting in a car by the exit. He jumped in and they sped off before I could reach them. But what I saw next made my blood run cold. The license plate on their car was Johnny's. I recognized it instantly, 4PAC207. It was the same car I had seen a month before. That's when everything clicked. It was Johnny's car. They had just painted it, so I didn't realize earlier. I still hate myself for not noticing. I never saw that man again, or the car. Now, all of it feels like a nightmare I wish I could erase. Rest in peace, Johnny. Story 2 by J.K. It was the summer of 2024, and my 3 buddies, Jake, Sam, and Marcus and I, were desperate for a break from our internship at the Kennedy Space Center. We had been drowning in rocket data for weeks, staring at screens until our eyes felt numb. But since we were total star nerds, all we wanted was one perfect night under a clear sky. We went through light pollution maps and Google Maps like it was a mission, finally picking a lonely clearing deep inside Tate's Hell State Forest, a swampy, empty stretch of Florida's panhandle. The name came from some old story about C. Tate, a settler who wandered into the swamp in the 1800s and never came out, supposedly cursed. We laughed it off. Ghost legends were for kids. We just wanted stars. Our home base was a small Airbnb cabin near Apalachicola, around 30 miles from the forest's edge. After work that Friday, we packed into my Tesla Model Y and Marcus's Mustang with blankets, snacks, and a telescope. No camping gear since we planned to sleep at the cabin. The 7-hour drive from the Space Center drained us, and by the time we reached the cabin, we just dropped our bags, grabbed a quick bite, and left again. The final stretch into Tate's Hell was rough. Narrow dirt trails twisted through thick pines and swamp water, the air buzzing with cicadas and the occasional loud splash of something moving just out of sight. With no cell service at all, we used walkie-talkies to keep the two cars connected, the crackling voices breaking the silence. Around 2 a.m., we reached the clearing, exhausted but excited. The sky was unbelievable. The stars looked so bright, it felt like you could reach up and grab them. We laid out the blankets, set up the telescope, and started looking around like little kids. Maybe 15 minutes later, Sam's voice crackled over the walkie-talkie from the Mustang. He said, "Yo, do you see those headlights?" My stomach tightened. We turned toward the trail we had driven in from, and a faint glow was creeping through the trees. Out here, 40 miles from the nearest town, at 2 in the morning, in a forest this huge. Nobody was randomly driving around. Whoever that was, they weren't there for anything normal. Jake, sitting in the Tesla with me, grabbed his walkie and said, "Flash them, see how they react." I tapped the Tesla's headlights 3 times. Sharp bursts of light. An old rusted pickup came into view and stopped about 100 yards away. No honk, no wave, no sound at all. Then we noticed them. Dark figures getting out of the truck. 2 or maybe 3. Hard to tell with the glare. They just stood there staring at us. And that's when we heard voices, low, rough, and broken, floating through the swamp as if whispered by the night itself. We couldn't understand a word. Marcus came over the radio, sounding shaken. "This is messed up," Sam added. "Those voices. Nobody's out here at 2 a.m. for anything good." I swung my flashlight toward them, but the beam didn't reach that far, only catching pieces of shadow. The whispers continued, soft and eerie, sliding into my ears like something trying to get close. Jake tried to stay calm, saying maybe they were locals, but suggested we move. We agreed to find another spot, but we made one rule. If their lights appeared again, we would head back to the Airbnb immediately. We turned off onto another trail. Anyone following us out here meant they were following us on purpose. We sped about a mile down a narrow side trail, found a small open patch, and set up again, this time with shaky hands and no real energy left. Just blankets and fear. 5 minutes later, Marcus's voice blasted through the walkie-talkie. He sounded panicked. "They're back." My chest dropped. The same headlights were slicing through the trees, only now they were closer, much closer. Then the engine revved, long and angry, like they wanted us to hear the threat in it. Sam's voice trembled. "We need to go, now!" We jumped into the cars instantly. Jake and I into the Tesla, Marcus and Sam into the Mustang. I floored it. the Tesla bouncing over thick roots, the undercarriage scraping like claws dragging underneath. Those headlights stayed behind us the whole time, high beams burning into the rear window. Jake used the walkie. "Marcus, you okay?" Marcus replied, breathless. "Barely. They're right on us." We were 4 unarmed interns, 40 miles from help, trapped at 2 a.m. in a swamp with a name like Tate's Hell. Nothing about this situation felt like a coincidence. I pushed the Tesla as fast as it could go, and Marcus stayed close behind. The trail turned sharply, and for a moment, the truck's headlights vanished behind the trees. I prayed that meant we'd lost them. But moments later, the lights appeared again, closer, almost playful, like they were enjoying the chase. We reached a fork in the trail, and I swerved left, praying it led to the main road. The truck followed without hesitation. After what felt like forever, the dirt finally became pavement, and an old highway sign glowed ahead. I glanced behind us, expecting those lights to burst through the trees, but the road behind us was completely empty. Marcus pulled the Mustang beside us, and we all got out, shaking and breathless, staring into the forest. The only sounds were crickets and the crackling from our walkie-talkies. The drive back to the Airbnb was silent. None of us could find words. We burst into the cabin and locked the door, but even that safe place felt wrong after what we had just been through. We kept asking ourselves who those people were. Maybe poachers, maybe drug runners, maybe something tied to those old stories about Tate's Hell. Out there at 2 a.m., nobody is wandering around for fun, and the way they stared at us, the slow chasing, the whispers, none of it felt random. It felt like they wanted us to be scared, like fear was part of whatever they were doing. We never went back. We don't talk about it. In December 2023, I took a 3-week-long vacation to Japan. I went because my family owns a hotel near the small mountain town of Kaganshin in western Japan, a large traditional Japanese inn built into the side of a hill beside the Daishoy River. The land around the hotel had been lived on for over 2,000 years and was considered sacred. My father once told me that when construction first began, the workers found old stone blocks and pillars buried under the ground. He believed there used to be some kind of shrine there back in the 9th century. I hadn't stayed at that hotel in more than 15 years, so I was excited to relive those memories. And because I've always loved exploring, I remembered what he told me and decided I would try to do some off-trail hiking in the forest below the hotel, hoping to find traces of those ancient ruins. When I reached the nearby city of Kanazawa, I picked up a rental car from the station and drove toward the hotel. Snow was falling thickly and traffic was awful. What should have been a 1-hour drive turned into a 2-hour crawl through the storm. I reached the hotel around 8 p.m. and let myself inside. In winter, the place was basically empty since tourists rarely visited that area in December. There weren't any staff around either. I realized I was the only person in the entire building, and the feeling of being alone in such a large hotel surrounded by mountains and snow was strangely unreal. I took one of the room keys from behind the counter, unlocked a suite, and slept for the night. The next morning, I went into the forest below the hotel. The snow was deep enough to swallow my ankles, and walking downhill through uneven, frozen ground was exhausting. After wandering far into the woods, I eventually realized I had completely lost my sense of direction. My phone showed no signal at all. I had been walking for about an hour without knowing where I was going. All around me were endless trees, and right ahead was a steep hill. I thought climbing it might give me a better view, maybe even let me spot a road or a roof somewhere. The climb was extremely difficult. The hill was steep, rocky, and slippery. But off to the left, through the dead branches, I noticed what looked like the remains of a path. I carefully made my way toward it. It was a narrow dirt trail, partly covered by snow and blocked by fallen branches, but it clearly led up toward the summit. I followed it until it suddenly ended, just vanished. As I looked around, I spotted a small cavity higher up the hillside, half hidden under thick vegetation, maybe 5 meters away. I climbed toward it and stood in front of a small cave entrance. A bit of mud had slid inside, but the opening was big enough for me to crawl through. I had a small flashlight, so I pointed it inside. I saw a small alcove right ahead and another narrow opening on the left. The moment I stepped into the cave, a strange smell hit me. It reminded me of the scent you smell near animals at the zoo. Thick, musky, unpleasant. The alcove was empty except for a long rectangular stone block sitting in the center. When I moved deeper into the cave, I found myself inside a bigger stone chamber. 2 more tunnels stretched out from it, but I didn't go near them. Against the far wall was another rectangular stone block, but this one was hollow. I walked closer, and to my shock, there were human bones lying inside. Surrounding the bones was a long piece of steel and several old bronze coins, the kind with the square hole in the middle. I just stared, frozen, overwhelmed by disbelief and fear. Without thinking, I picked up one of the coins. I still don't know why. It was old and rusty, but its markings were still visible. Before I could examine it, a loud crash echoed from deep within one of the side tunnels. I instantly raised my flashlight, the beam shaking in my hand. The animal's smell grew stronger, almost suffocating. Something primal in me panicked, and for some reason, I grabbed the long steel piece lying with the bones. It felt like the remains of an old blade. Holding it out in front of me, I slowly backed toward the entrance. The smell had changed. It now carried a faint scent of smoke beneath the heavy stench. And then I heard it, a steady, rhythmic thumping coming from that dark tunnel, like someone banging on a drum far below. That was the moment I completely broke. I turned and ran, sprinting toward the entrance of the cave. As I burst out into the cold air, I swear I felt the entire cave rumble under my feet, as if something massive was moving inside. I leapt out of the entrance and tumbled down the snowy slope, hitting branches and frozen ground. The blade slipped from my hand, but I didn't dare stop to get it. I just kept running, crashing through dead twigs, slipping, falling, getting back up, and running again. Eventually, I heard the sound of a car passing somewhere in the distance. Following the noise as best as I could, I finally stumbled out of the forest and onto the side of a road. I collapsed in the snow, gasping, relieved and terrified at the same time. I managed to flag down a car. The driver was hesitant at first, but after seeing how shaken I was, he let me in. As we drove, I learned I was nearly 4 miles away from the hotel. When I got back, I rushed to my room, packed everything, and left immediately. I didn't feel safe staying alone in that building anymore. I drove back to Kanazawa and spent the night there. This story has a follow-up, though. When the hotel reopened in February, my father texted me. Someone had broken in through a first-floor window. Nothing was stolen or damaged, except the front door of my room, which had been smashed open with what looked like a heavy metal object. I don't know if it has anything to do with what happened in that cave, but I am definitely not going to be staying at that hotel ever.